Good morning. Welcome to the Shir, Dach Yomi, Torah Or, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. So we were explaining before about the idea of the Chashmal. The Maimer is explaining about the idea that Hashem makes separation between different levels of holiness, and that's called the Parachas and the Parsa, in order that we should come to the separation between holiness and unholiness, which that's the idea of the Bris Milah. So we were explaining that this process of making a separation between one world and the next is through what's called the Chashmal, which we said, like when a teacher has a very deep idea, he has to give it over through an analogy, through a mashal, in order that someone on a lower level should be able to understand it. So even though this physical story that he's using to explain his deep idea is much lower than the idea he's trying to express, but it comes from a much deeper part of his understanding. That's why only a very smart person can say a very good analogy. And the same thing that Hashem makes these analogies, brings down His wisdom into a lower level, and through these levels it comes down to us. So that was the idea of the Chashmal. And we're explaining that this is the separation between Malchus of Atzilus and Bria. Atzilus is Hashem, the way that He's the creator, Hashem's attributes, and Bria is the beginning of the created worlds on the spiritual level. So this separation between Malchus of Atzilus and the Nivraim is through the Chashmal. So in the Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, second line from the top to the end of the line. Zen Yun HaChashmal Shemaki Famal Bishla Zen Pim Venuk Vamitzidehen Shur B'Charishli Yanika Sachitzeni. So what's the idea of the Chashmal? The Chashmal encompasses Zan Malchus in order that there shouldn't be life to unholiness. Like we said before, the difference between intellect and emotion, that intellect is objective and emotion is subjective. The idea of intellect is you're thinking about something outside of yourself, an idea, and emotion is thinking about how you feel about it, connected to your ego. So the same thing in Atzilus, the idea of Chachma Bina is the way that Hashem relates to Himself, and the idea of Venukva, Zan Malchus, is the way that Hashem relates to us. So that's connected to Mitzvahs, connected to the existence of the created beings. And so from that level, there could be life for unholiness. So it has to come from a higher level, from Chachma Bina, to protect it, that it shouldn't give life to unholiness. Like we said, that a person's emotions are guided by his intellect very strongly, so then his ego isn't expressed, and so he doesn't do silly things. And so that's the idea of the Chashmal, that it protects Hashem's expression in the world, that it shouldn't give rise to unholiness. But then we said that in addition to the Chashmal is also this Shu. And then we said, what's the idea of a Shu? That the lowest part of the body is the foot, and that's what walks on the ground. But even the foot has to have a separation between itself and the ground, which that's the Shu. And that means that that Malchus of Atzilus is the lowest level of Atzilus. But there has to be a separation between Malchus and the created beings, which we said that's through this Malach Metat, through this special kind of angel, which through him is Hashem's revelation in creating the world becomes limited, so that we should be a finite world instead of being too much revelation. Now levad b'shvil shlo yenik asachatzen emelu hu mafsik shlo higili kol ha'or shabat tzilus tiu v'gam echad liyiskach b'rvia ala shiyeh b'chenes b'yesh v'hainu ayidei shahamasach mafsik ben atzilus b'rvia v'or shem shach me'atzilus ayidei masach lachis b'rvia hu or shal toilada. So this idea that of the Shu of this, that Hashem's light of Atzilus comes through the separation, through this is the idea that is called Orshal Toilada, a new light, meaning when you have light that comes through a curtain, so the light that comes out that comes through the curtain is a different quality of light than the light on the other side. When you have light from the sun shining through a curtain, so the light that's breaking through that curtain is a different type of light, different quality of light than the light from the sun originally. It's called Orshal Toilada. So the same thing, the light of Atzilus, when it comes through this Masach, through this separation, of this shu, of the Malach Matat, so it's a completely different quality of light, of revelation. So this is why it's called Yesh Me'ayin. Generally, there's two explanations what it means Yesh Me'ayin. That is something from nothing. Obviously, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from Hashem. The whole world is created by Hashem. But when he's saying it's coming from nothing, it means it comes from nothing similar, from something completely incomparable. So this idea that it comes from nothing, you could say that the Creator is so much higher than the created beings that it's like it came from nowhere. How could it be that a finite world came from an infinite Creator? That's one explanation of Yesh Me'ayin. And the second explanation, Yesh Me'ayin, is that it came from something which is completely incomparable to its source. In other words, Hashem's revelation that's creating the world is so much less than the revelation of Hashem to Himself that it's like nothing. So when he's saying it comes from nothing, it comes from nothing in comparison to its source of the revelation. Like when a teacher has to limit his intellect to a student to teach him something, so he has a very deep idea and he has to explain a very simple idea. So that idea is like nothing compared to his original wisdom. So that's called Yesh Me'ayin. V'hinei b'Shabbos me'or hatzilus amatei sabshus habriya levad v'inu elam masach echad mashenki me'masach ha'yeshev frish ben Eretz Yisrael v'chutz la'aretz sheberetz Yisrael haga yidei tzir v'chutz la'aretz al yidei asiyah. So this, that there's a separation between Atzilus and Bria. There's this, which that's the Masach, the Parsa. So there's difference between Shabbos and the weekdays. That on Shabbos, the revelation of Atzilus comes into the world only through Bria, only through one separation. Like the idea of Bria is the idea of thought. In other words, and when a person's intellect and emotions are expressed in their thought, even though it's not intellect or the essence and emotion, but it's still a very high expression of a person's intellect and emotion. The way a person relates to himself is through their intellect, is through their thoughts, even though thoughts is only a garment of the soul. So on Shabbos, the revelation of Atzilus comes into the world through Bria. So even though it's only a garment, it's not Hashem Himself, it's not even Atzilus, it's not even but it's still a very great revelation of Hashem to us, that we're experiencing about Hashem. Whereas during the weekdays, it's coming through Yitziriya and Asiyah, which has like speech and action, which is a much lower garment, that you don't see so much this revelation of the person through his speech and his actions compared to a person in their own thoughts. והנה כל זה עדיין מבחינת קדושת צבא שלום לך משתחווים שגם היש באותו לכן פרחת הפרסה סנא היא מבחינת פרחת המבדלת בין קודש לקודש הפרסה מבדל בין הסריסת יציר לסריסת עשייה הרי גם הסריסת עשייה הוא קודש אך מעשי למטה יש עוד מסך הפרסה וקליפס נגע ובכן ישראל לחופף על הבריס וכמו שכתוב בעץ חיים שם מהם פרק א' ונקרא קליפס נגע חלוף היא הר לה המחס על היסוד הוא הבדלה בין קודש לחויל. So these separations between the different worlds through the Chashmal is separating between different levels of holiness. Like we said in the Beis HaMikdash, that there is between the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the Kodesh and the Azara. So all the places in the Beis HaMikdash had this current to separate between different levels of holiness. But then through these separations in holiness itself, it's able to come about a separation between holiness and unholiness, which that's called Klipas Naiga. Klipas Naiga is this intermediary between holiness and unholiness. And that's why it's called Klipas Naiga, that it's covering but it shines, meaning that it has the ability of revealing holiness, of being elevated into holiness, but it also has the ability to conceal holiness, to cover over Hashem, which that's all the things in the physical world that we relate to. They could be used for holiness, but they also could be used for unholiness. So it's the intermediary between holiness and unholiness. And this is the idea of the Arla, which covers over the bris. Or just like in a person's heart, so a person has desires, and the Arlas Halev, the covering of the heart, means that a person has negative desires, and he has to take away those negative desires in order that he should realize that his true desire is for Hashem. And so in the body also, this part of the body which there's a covering, which that covering makes a separation between holiness and holiness, and that's why you have to take off that covering. So this is the idea of the Arla, which is the idea of Klipas Noiga. The Avshesha Parsa bein Asasris the Asiya Klipas Noiga אם כן, אפשר הוא גם כן מכנס חשמל מפסיק בין הספירס תעשייה לנויגה. גם מקום מאחר בפרשת הסחרן הפסק שמה חולו נספר גם כן. שהאבדל הוא על ידי בכנס חשמל, וגם מקום מאחר נספר עניין בכנס התופי. שממוצע בין כדי של קליבס נויגה חולו, וזהו עניין אשר ברלוקים לעשות הססקין, ותרמויס נסריחם תיקון חולו. כי אדם נברא בצלמנו כנמוסינו, ויש להם מסך זה. So, this is the idea that somebody asked one of the Tanaim, why did Hashem make that a person has to have a bris milah? If why would Hashem make somebody imperfect? Hashem is the creator and He creates good things. So why would Hashem make something that you need to fix? So he said, well, just like you have these beans, you have to cook them for a long, long time in order to eat them. So what does that mean? Why did Hashem make that we have to have something to fix? Because, like we're going to explain, Hashem wants that He should dwell in our world through our service of Him. So Hashem wants that there should be a separation between holiness and unholiness, and through that separation, there's the ability for us to transform that unholiness, the possibility for unholiness, into holiness. Remove the possibility for unholiness in the physical world, meaning a person living in the physical world, even though he could do unholy things, he removes himself from those things and elevates those physical things into holiness. And that's what Hashem really wants. Like we're going to say that Hashem doesn't want His dwelling place to be in Atzilus. Hashem wants a dwelling place in our physical world with us. So that's why Hashem had to make that there should be this covering on holiness, so that we should remove it, because Hashem wants the dwelling place in us through our own service. So that's this process that Hashem makes, the separation between holiness and unholiness, and in order that we should elevate it, Hashem made that there should also be expressed in the physical body of the Jewish person this process of creating a part that needs to be removed, and through that you reveal a holiness in the person. Since that's the whole way that Hashem conducts Himself with us, Hashem wants that should also be part of our physical body and existence. יצטרך לסכן ליסחול בכנס חון שנעשה תרס הקודש והיינו עדי שיכנולים בקדושת השבס. So what does this mean? That we have to elevate the physical things in order that they should be called chulin shenasa taras hachodesh. In other words, there's things which are essentially holy, like a carbon, and you have chulin, you have things which are not holy, which are regular food, but you make them that they should be tahor, that they should be pure from any unholiness, just as much as a carbon. In other words, that our physical things, even though they're not like in Atzilus, that you have the complete revelation of Hashem, but they are completely removed from unholiness because they're dedicated to Hashem. The person in his physical life is dedicated to the service of Hashem. So it's also included in holiness. But in order that a person should be able to do this, he receives the power from Shabbos. Since on Shabbos there's actually a revelation of Atzilus in the world through Bria, and he experiences this great closeness to Hashem. That gives him the power that throughout the week he should be able to elevate his physical things into holiness also. And that's what we're saying. That on Shabbos, Hashem's revelation comes to the world only through Bria, not through any of the other garments. Like when a person's revelation to himself in his own thought is a very powerful revelation. So the revelation of Hashem on Shabbos is very powerful to everyone and to us. And therefore, since on Shabbos there's great revelation of Hashem from Atzilus into this world, so a person doesn't working in physical things, but rather he's completely focused on Hashem. And even though it's still a created being, it's still not like Atzilus, literally, it's not mamish like Atzilus, but still he's completely focused on Hashem, because the light of Atzilus shines in the physical world only through Bria. So through this light of Atzilus that's shining to him on his physical world on Shabbos, that's what elevates him, that he should be able to elevate his physical things during the week. Whereas during the week, that it's the creation of the world is through Yitzira and Asiya, meaning Hashem's revelation is coming through all these different levels. Like we said, that Bria is like thought, and Yitzira and Asiyah is like speech and action, that it's lower garments of the person, so it's not such a complete revelation. So and during the weekdays that it's coming through these different garments, there's klipas noiga, there's the possibility for unholiness, there's the separation between holiness and unholiness. But through that a person during the week, he elevates all his physical things, that he's working, that he does is faithful, meaning that he does everything according to Shulchan Aruch, and all his business dealings and all his the way that he treats other people, he does everything according to what the Torah says. So he elevates all his physical business and his physical activities with other people. He elevates them all to holiness. And even his eating and his sleeping, since he does that in order to be able to learn and daven and do mitzvahs, that's also elevated to holiness. So all his physical activities during the week, that he does them in order to be able to serve Hashem, they're called chulin shenas al taras hakodesh. Originally they were just mundane things, but they come taras hakodesh, they become to be pure like a carbon, which this is something that you wouldn't have if it wouldn't be for klipas nega, if it wouldn't be this separation of Hashem's revelation to us. If Hashem's revelation would be completely revealed, then there wouldn't be the possibility of chulin shenas al taras hakodesh. We wouldn't be able to have mundane things which become holy, because there'd be only holy things. So Hashem had to make that there's a concealment on Himself, in order that there should be mundane things which become holy, which that's the intention from the beginning. And that's what we, Motzi Shabbos, we say, blessed, Baruch, who separates between holiness and mundane. We said before, how is it possible to make a separation from one level to the next? That through the chashmal, which is from a very high level. Like we said, the ability to bring down your wisdom to a lower level is through an analogy. And so that comes from a deeper level of your intellect, that you should be able to bring down your wisdom to a lower level. So the same thing, in order that Hashem's revelation should come down to a lower level, to us, in our physical world and mundane activities, that's coming from a higher level of Hashem. Because if it wouldn't be for this separation, then there wouldn't be yesh me'an, there wouldn't be this new possibility of people that feel separate from Hashem and decide to dedicate their lives to Hashem. And that's called chulin shenas al taras hakodesh, because there would be only kodesh. In other words, Hashem didn't want that His dwelling place should be in Atzilus, or it's only completely revealed holiness. Hashem wanted that there should be this parsa, there should be this chashmal, that we should feel ourselves to be separate from Him. And there we elevate those physical things into holiness. And that's what Hashem wants, the dir b'tachtenim, in those mundane activities that we use for holiness. V'hinei b'skal so derech ha-parsa dain hu kedusha ad seif asiyah shisham makom hanega v'zeh mitzvahs mila mal yudkei shuhu mal mechashmal debina shumei bechanes yudkei ki yechachma bina hin train rein dahainu shemasirim ha'arla shehi klibas nega oz nisha rak chashmal debina shu levush shetzarch liyas came before the milam chadei shiyeh his habus biyachul ava ha'arla shehi klibas nega tzarch lahasir. So now we're explaining that in this separation between holiness and unholiness, there's two aspects. There's the chashmal and there's the klipas noiga. What's the difference? The chashmal means that Hashem has to make a concealment in order that there should be physical things, that there should be things which are not holy, and those things you make holy. That there should be a physical, mundane world which you elevate to holiness through the Torah and the mitzvahs. That's the chashmal. That's like when the teacher wants to give his wisdom to a person on a much lower level, he has to use the analogy because he wants the other person to understand his teachings. Without that analogy, he wouldn't be able to understand. Whereas the klipas noiga means that there's a separation between holiness and unholiness, that it could give life to unholiness, meaning that a person in the physical world has Yetzer Hara and he could do Averis, which that's not the intention. The intention is not that a person should do Averis. The intention is that a person should dedicate their life to Hashem in the physical world. So in these two aspects, one aspect is that there's a concealment of Hashem, that there should be physical things. And one aspect is that we have the possibility to Averis, and there's a possibility for unholiness. We have to remove that possibility for unholiness, which that's called Klipas Nega, and which that's the idea of the Bris Milah. The idea of the Bris Milah is to remove that covering, that there should be physical things, there should be mundane activities, but they should be only used for Hashem, they should be only used for holiness. Which that's what he says, that Milah is the two words, Mal and Yud-Kei. Yud-Kei is Chachma and Bina, and Mal means revelation, which is it's like speech. In other words, we have to reveal, we have to be Mal, that the Yud-Kei, that the fact that there's a physical world is coming from Hashem's desire that he should have a dwelling place here. That's what we have to reveal. We have to remove the covering of unholiness in this world and reveal that the purpose of the world's creation is in order that Hashem should dwell here. That's the idea of Milah, Mal Yud-Kei. We have to reveal that the intention of the concealment of why there's an analogy, why there's physical things, is in order that Hashem should have a dwelling place us. So that's the idea of Milah, Mal Yud-Kei, to reveal the purpose behind the physical existence.